Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about chord melodies again, but we're actually going to be starting from scratch with how to start making chord melodies, playing melodies and chords at the same time if you haven't done that before, and go through a few steps from really right at the beginning, starting steps, up to fairly complicated using inversions and some of the ideas we've talked about in previous videos. The last chord melody video that I did, I know, was on the upper end probably, just because it was talking about substitutions and chord alterations, and assuming that you have done these beginning steps, so I thought I should cover those. It was also because I had a question just earlier tonight from somebody on a previous video about this, which I'll read in just a second. So first, my little spiel: if you'd like to support me or the channel, in the description there's a link to Patreon. Now in particular would be especially appreciated because on Monday my car broke down and I don't have a working car at the moment, so anything would help if you are able to. Thank you. Okay, so let me read the comment that I got earlier. It was from GJ, and he wrote, "I'm a country player trying to learn chord melody. I'm confused as to what to use as the beginning point to create a chord melody. Do I play by ear and simply use the chords I know, or do I use the chords suggested by the lead sheets? Currently I use a harmonized scale filling in with diatonic and diminished chords." So it sounds like he is, if you're using harmonized scales and diminished chords, I would say it's not quite at the beginning. So we're going to start earlier than that so that we can really cover all the steps involved, and hopefully at some point in the middle there we'll get to an answer to his question, as well as info that everyone can use, I'm hoping. So I was thinking too about what song to do this with, and I'm actually going to do it with Happy Birthday. I wanted to do a song that everyone knows, a song that's relatively simple harmonically to illustrate some of these points. And I think that it will be more useful to use a song this simple than you know, a 32 bar standard or something like that. And also because this is a topic that any style of guitar, you know, any style of music that you play as a guitarist, this can be applied to. So by using a really basic song, I think it'll keep it more accessible as well. Okay, so let's get started with this. I just wanted to pause the video so I could plug in my phone, since I didn't realize my battery was getting low. So we're going to do this with Happy Birthday, as I said, and we are going to start with chords that probably everyone knows to begin the process. We'll use more complicated chords a little bit later. We're just going to use open chords to start out, and we're going to do this in the key of C. So the first thing you have to know is the melody, and the second thing you already have to know are the chords. The name of this is playing a chord melody. There's no way around either of those. You have to either learn the melody by ear, learn it by reading, you know, music or tab, or however you're going to approach that. And I'm going to also assume that at the very beginning that somebody is reading down here in open position and first position. Same thing basically. So the beginning of the song, first two measures, we'd have, there's the melody, the chords, happy birthday to you, C and G. Now to combine these, there's one thing we have to take out from the chords, and that's any note within the chord that's higher than the melody, we're going to remove. And that means we don't need to even press down those strings. We're just not going to play them. So if we have, what that is now is that C major normally doesn't have this note, second fret on the third string, which is A. We took out the first finger up here from and the open first string because they're above the melody note. If I kept them in, we would get this. And now the melody note is kind of concealed underneath these top two strings. So we're taking them out because they cover up the melody. There are ways that you can add higher notes, like harmonizing the melody, that are good, but just for this process, we're taking out any notes higher than the melody. So that would normally leave us with 3, 2, and open, fifth, fourth, and third strings for C major, but we need this melody note. So we're going to play the chord on beat 1, and then try to keep your fingers down wherever they are on the chord that you're playing, and get through the measure. And then when the chord changes or not, we're going to play another chord on beat 1 of the next measure. And sometimes the chord will stay the same. You just play the chord again. If it changes, you play the new chord. In this case, it goes to G, and the melody note in this case is the open second string. So this actually is within G, so we don't have to change anything. The next part is still G major, and then this note is C major. For this new part here, to be with G major, we don't have, again, the second string, second fret, third string within G major as a normal note in the chord. So we're going to just add that. Now, one thing I did there without really thinking about it is I didn't play this in G major, the second fret on the fifth string, because I wanted to use, I guess, my first finger for the melody note. I could have just done it like this, but all I did was just mute the fifth string with the underneath of this finger since it was already down. I don't think that makes a difference either way. It's just kind of what I did. I guess to be more specific about it, the lower the notes are, the muddier they tend to sound, just personally, and a lot of the chords that I use and that a lot of jazz guitarists use will have the bass note and then the next string muted so that it doesn't get too muddy, especially down in this register of the guitar. So, melody, and then this melody note is part of C major, and again, I'm not strumming down to the first string, because that would be higher than the melody note. And then we have this melody note is going to be C major, so we need to add that on top of C. So if we have, all I'm doing is my pinky is playing the melody note. This is just all C major, the rest of it. And then we're going to play melody notes. Now F, I would normally play as a bar chord, but the melody note is open B. So rather than try to find some way to be able to have the bar and the B at the same time, it's simpler just to not bar it and only strum up to the open B string. So the bottom four notes are just all part of F major, and then we're going to play the open B. So if we have, and then my second finger is the next melody note within F major, and then open first string is part of C major as the melody, and we add D right here, the melody note on top of G, and then the last melody note is my first finger, and that's part of C. So all together, slowly so that we can see what's going on. So there we go. And that's the entire thing we just did, just played slowly in time so that, actually you could probably slow down the video if you needed it slower, but still probably, I think, more useful than blowing through it too quickly. So far we have a very full sounding arrangement, right? Even though we're just playing on beat 1, as long as your fingers are staying down on these chords, they're gonna ring through the measure and make it sound, you know, pretty big sounding. Definitely bigger than just the melody. And we're starting to reach a goal here of playing melody and chords at the same time. Well, no, that we are playing melody and chords at the same time at this point. However, we haven't really expanded anything of what we know, we're just combining things. So the first thing I'd like to suggest is if you have a melody note that's adding something into a chord that you already know, like the very beginning of this song, if I were to just come here and play this, 3-2-2, I don't think a lot of guitarists at a certain level would know that this is related to this open C major chord, or that it's part of the C shape, because 3-2-2 doesn't look like it. It has two of the same notes, but it doesn't resemble this shape, right? So what you can do in this case, and this is why I wanted to choose C major, because we don't need the sharps or flats to be part of the key signature to help us with this, is ask yourself, what note is this? What letter? And this is A, and it's part of C major chord, so we're just going to go C, D, E, F, G, A, and that's a C6 chord. It's not a complete chord because we don't have a fifth in the chord, but that doesn't matter. We'd still notate that as C6. So you can really expand your chord knowledge by doing this, and at the same time learn some self-sufficient arrangements of songs that you know. And they don't have to be these simple songs, but I think they're very useful to start with, because thinking of two things at once does take some practice, thinking of chords and melody at the same time. And if you do this, you'll get to be able to do it eventually, immediately, without needing to think about it beforehand. Okay, so the next kind of level with this is there were no seventh chords in that arrangement. In the original version of this, there aren't a ton of seventh chords, but the G chord is usually notated as a seventh chord. So if we don't know any fingerings for G7, then there's two ways to think about this. One is to look up one. There are open G7 chords, but usually you'll see this as the first G7 chord. And that could be something if we wanted to add to the end of the song. That wouldn't be on beat 1, so that's the other thing we can start adding, is chords within the measure instead of just playing them on beat 1. So let's start back at the beginning. Now we're playing G7 instead. And this is where it starts to get a little bit more, it's not jazz, but a little bit more into that territory, because this is a shape when I'm playing down here, 3, 2, and 3. This is a shape that we see very often all around the neck, either on these strings or the next strings over, 5, 4, and 3. If this is not something that you had already known, because we're in C and we know all these chords fit within the key of C, you can just think, well, G7, I don't know, it's added, and just count up G, A, B, C, D, E, F, and find that that's the 7th note, and add that F into the chord below the melody. That is oversimplifying a bit, and if you're not in the key of C, you have to know the key signature that you're in to know which note belongs, and you have to know that the chords fit into the key with, like, into the diatonic chord scale. And we'll get into that later too. So in terms of adding chords within the measure, there's no rule that I tend to suggest at the beginning of this, except maybe to start by using the chords you already have down. So if we have, and then this would also be with the 7th in it now. So instead of just playing this melody note by itself, I've replayed the G chord again. And it might make you change your fingerings, it might do something like that. If we have, let's see. It's definitely going to make you have to switch chords faster if you're adding chords towards the end of a measure, because we're still going to be playing beat 1 with a chord every time. So that would be a closely related step to the first one, but still on the earlier side of learning chord melodies, and something that will get you ready to take it to another level. The next level is basically not doing this down. There are harder things that you can do in this position to add to these chords, but really where most people go next is playing this somewhere up the neck instead of all down here. And I think the next one that is good to do is harmonizing the melody with the diatonic chord scale. If I go over all about the diatonic chord scale again, even though it's completely related here, this video is going to get way too long. So there is a video on the playlist relating to diatonic chord scales. And just very briefly, this is where we're talking about major, minor, minor, major, dominant 7th. Let's go up to the next string, minor, diminished, or half diminished. I switched to 7th chords, didn't I? And then I'll end with a triad, major again. So major, minor, minor, major, 7th, minor, diminished, and major again. So how would we do that? We could, but this melody is already a little bit low at the beginning. So we're going to put the melody up an octave. And this is where, if you can't read up here yet, you're going to have to do this by ear. Another reason simple songs are good for this, because you can just kind of ear it out. These types of songs we've heard all our lives generally. So if we're doing this up here now, the thing about the diatonic chord scale is that if you're used to practicing them going all the way up without switching strings in between, then you're probably going to want to get the melody note all on the first string. So that would mean we're going to have this instead. The C chord scale, if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's actually stop there for a second. The melody note that we played here is under 3. So 3 is a minor chord, minor seventh. The next melody note is here, so we're going up to the next scale degree, yeah. And then back major seventh, back to minor seventh. And then we're jumping all the way up to the 6 chord, and then back to the 5 chord. The thing with this one is that you're inserting harmony, you're not respecting the original harmony, or you're not executing the original harmony. So if I play that together, I think you'll hear what I mean. This chord matches up because the melody note is the third of the chord, and that just happens to be where we're putting notes on the first string. But this is E minor 7, F major 7, E minor 7, A minor 7, and G7. I do think this is useful to do, but you are going to be changing the harmony. One thing that can help is if you have a bass player, because usually if you're harmonizing chords like this, if our ear hears the bass note at the same time, we will associate this with the bass note instead of the lowest note that we're playing in these voicings. So even though E is the lowest note of this voicing, if we hear C on the bottom, I don't think I can get, let me see. Yeah, I don't think I can, I'll just do it like this. Our ear does start to hear this as a C chord instead. So if this is going for all 3 beats, and then this is the next beat of the next measure, so let's see if I can do this all. Then it does start to really sound like the original harmony. But you'd need to record the low notes separately. You'd need to get a bass player to play with you to have that work. But we've talked about diatonic chord scales before. So the next thing that's related to this, but does keep you within the same harmony as the original, is inversions. And we've talked about this too, specifically with diminished chords linking inversions. But what we're going to do here is still think about where the melody note is going. And now we don't really need to stay on the same strings, because if we're using the inversions, it's going to be kind of only if we have to. Let's assume for a second that we do know chords up the neck now. Maybe let's aim this towards jazz players. If we know the melody note is here, then we know that this C major 7th chord would work. 8, nothing, 9, 9, and 8. So if we have, and then the next one up here, because we're across to the first string, we're going to play as an inversion. And then we're to the next chord, which is G7. The next one, we could play diminished because it's in between the inversion, and then back to the inversion again. Let's see. Let me just go through the rest here. Let's see. We could go. So let me go back for a second to kind of talk about what this is, because this actually is more of a mixture of 2 things than I had thought it would be. So at the beginning, we're just basing it off of this major 7th chord. That's probably the first major 7th that jazz players usually learn. But the melody note is not part of that. So we're just going to drop the top note and put it here instead, keeping the other notes the same. Another way to think of this is we're just using the shell voicings that we've talked about in the past underneath the melody note. Melody note, and then here we could play diminished to lead us to the next chord, because diminished will lead us where we need to go very often. Or we could have, I think what I had done before is just play the inversion that fits under the melody, because now we're on a chord tone, right? We're on C. And if we're on a chord tone in the melody, then we know that an inversion fits underneath it. I probably should have started by saying that. I don't want to assume that that's common knowledge. B is a chord tone within G, right? So we know that we can play an inversion of G underneath it for G7. And we could harmonize this note. Let's save that for now. Just single notes, still just beat 1. The melody note of this one relating to G is the 9th. And we could just play G9, which I think is what I did here. But let's say instead that we just do diminished, we could go, wait a second, let's do it down here. So A is the melody note, doesn't fit into G, which is the chord that doesn't fit, I don't want to say that. It's in between chord tones in G7. So there's our inversion, and we just put diminished before it. And then the next one is D, which is leading us to C. So we could play diminished there as well, and then back to the inversion for C, based on the fact that C is the melody note and it's a chord tone. G up here, the high G is a chord tone, so we can play an inversion. And then E is the melody note, so we can play an inversion. C is the melody note, so we can play an inversion. The next one, I probably should have done this first, diminished, because we're in between. And then A is the melody note, the chord is F, and A is a chord tone, so we can play an inversion of F major 7. I think what I did I don't remember if I did that before actually, because what I was thinking, even if I didn't play it, was that we could do something like sharp 11, we could do something like that. Let's not do that. I think I played diminished now that I'm thinking about it. So that last part, we have in C major, all these melody notes are just part of C. So it's inversion, 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 connecting to the next chord with diminished, and then the melody note is part of the chord in this measure, A, which is part of F major 7. Now for the end of the song, we have F, which is leading us to C, as the note F is leading to E as the next melody note, but this is really leading us to C major. Dun, dun, dun. So we can use diminished for that. E is the melody note, which is a chord tone of C, so it's an inversion. C is the melody note, which is same thing. D is the melody note, which is part of G, and I think I had played this as diminished because you could stay all within C with a lot of this harmonization, and that's where the justification comes for that. But let's say we wanted to do it as G, we can just play it as an inversion of G instead. So diminished to lead us to C major, which is an inversion of C, inversion of C. D is the melody note, which is a chord tone of G, so I'm using an inversion of G for this one, for G7. And then we could end it on an inversion, but ending with the 7th in the bass does make it sound a little incomplete, so I believe I ended with just a major chord. And then we could go down if we want just a nice lower chord to end the song. And I think right about there, if you can do that without needing to pre-plan it, then you are probably set for what we talked about last time, and being able to do alterations and substitutions without needing to spend a really long period of time working on these basics to get to that point. This can range from being fairly intuitive, like going back to the open chords. Some people pick this up quickly. It's more common though that it does take some time, so don't get discouraged. It's tempting to go for songs that are harder because usually people don't get home from work and put on Happy Birthday to listen to relax or anything. But I definitely think that you will get this faster if you can choose some simple songs. They don't have to be nursery rhyme type songs, but if you can keep them on the simple side, you'll be doing yourself a favor at the beginning. So this does, as we went through the video, contain some things that I didn't go into detail with here, because I know after I combine the first part of this video and this will already be definitely over 20 minutes. So if you'd like to look back, there's diatonic chord scale video in the guitar instructional video playlist, and there is the connecting inversions with diminished chords video as well. And both of those will contain the things that we didn't have time to include within this video. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that if you have any questions, let me know, because there's not one approach to this. This is just the way I teach it, because the progression is pretty clear. If you can do the first thing, then you're ready to do the next thing. If you can do that, you can do the next one. If you jump from the first to the last one, or try to just start at the last one, or just start at the middle one, it will take longer than if you do the first step beforehand, guaranteed. So let me know if you have any questions. Like I said, hope you all have a great time practicing, and I will catch you next time. Oh, and subscribe if you like this and all that stuff. Thanks. Bye-bye.